Outlining the conclusion. So what's the point of a conclusion? There's a couple of goals. One, you want to summarize the book. This is where you do want to summarize it at the end. You close all open loops, meaning like all the claims you've made, the statements, anything like that. You want to make sure you tie everything up in a bow. You give them a call to action, and then you point them to any additional resources, right? So here's what you do not want to do in a conclusion. Do not introduce new information. All the new info should be in the chapters. Conclusions only summary. Don't make it too long. This should be conclusion should always be short. Short, again, as short as possible without leaving anything out. And don't break faith with the reader. So what's it mean to break faith with the reader? We get this all the time. You're doing anything that's not aligned with the rest of the book. So like, for example, if you just take, again, we'll take this book. This is a 500-page book, Scribe method, right? This is literally everything you need to know to write a nonfiction book. It'd be tough to put more info in here. I mean, I'm sure there's something we could put in, but this is comprehensive. And you open it to any page. There's no fat on this. This is straight to the bone. Every page is actionable information, actionable info after actionable info, the whole thing. If at the end, the conclusion was then a big sales pitch for something, that would be breaking faith. It's not at all. But because the whole book is teaching and then the end is sales. But if the whole book had been sales and then the conclusion was sales, that's not breaking faith. It'd probably make it a terrible book if it's just selling you, but at least it's not breaking faith. So you just want to stay aligned, right? Whatever your book was like, make sure the conclusion is the same way, right? Now, here's a very interesting thing about conclusions. Many people read conclusions first, especially for business books. And it's a brilliant idea if you think about it, because it summarizes the book, right? So they can know what's coming. It tells them if it's worth their time. Now, the reason people do this is because, again, most business books have terrible introductions that don't summarize the book or that don't explain what's coming in the book. And so they don't know, they have to sort through to see if it's worth reading. So they go to the conclusion. But when you write your conclusion, think of that in mind. Like, you want a really clear, tight summary that lays out exactly what's in the book. You don't need to sell. Don't worry about that. Because if the type of person who's skipping to the conclusion, they don't want to be sold. So just be very clear about what was just read. All right. So if you scroll down again to the bottom of the outline, I'm going to take you through each part of outlining your conclusion. There's 4 parts to conclusion. The first part is the hook, right? Again, every single chapter starts with a hook. Conclusions or intros are just that's just another name for it. It's just a type of chapter. So the hook, I usually like to use an anecdote or story that kind of wraps up the book, right? Good stories have a lot of conflict. The story for the conclusion could be like the one that doesn't have much conflict. It's like where everything goes right. Think about it like a movie, right? The movie is just conflict the whole time. The hero wins at the end, and then all the bows are tied up super quickly. So that's what this is. Part 2, you kind of want to restate the thesis. This is what the book was about. Then I like to go through and just recap every chapter. In chapter 1, you learned X. In chapter 2, you learned Y. In chapter 3, you learned Z. And by the way, if you've done your outline correctly, then like all the key takeaways section of the outline, done right, those can honestly be just aggregated into, at least to form the outline of the chapter or the conclusion. And then the last part is a call to action. What do they do when they finish the book? And don't overthink that. Just tell them what to do. At this, we're like, go write your book. A good trick. Now, a lot of people want to know, especially for business books, how do I engage the reader? Like, I don't want to try and sell them and be shady, but I want them to know that, like, I offer a service they can use. So a really good trick is invite the reader to connect with you, right? If this book helped you, I'd love to know. And then put your email address. If you need more help, I'm happy to assist. Just email me here, or look at these other online resources, which is the next question. What about digital assets or online resources or further sort of things? So here's the thing with digital assets. If they're not required, okay, but if you want to use them, just make sure they're the type of things that people wouldn't feel cheated if it wasn't in the book. So imagine like, if you're writing a book about how to do something and like the secret sauce isn't in the book at all, but you tell them they gotta send you their email and register for this and do this to get the secret sauce, whatever that is, they're gonna get pissed off like that, and they should. But if like you've explained your secret sauce and what the method is, but then you have a really cool map and that just kind of lays it out, same information, but lays it out in a fun way that's illustrated and drawn, that's really big, that couldn't fit in a book. And you're like, oh yeah, I'll give you this digital asset for free. Just go here, put in your email address. Then people are like, oh, that's so cool, right? Like we haven't added it because we launched Book School recently, but what we'll do eventually in here is at the end, we'll say, hey, look, all the content's in here, the information. If you want a video course of the same stuff, it's all at scribebookschool.com. You can go here. People are like, oh, that's so cool. Like I can watch it all on video too, and it doesn't cost me anything. What about appendices? You don't need them unless you're writing the type of book where an audience would expect it. So if you're doing an academic book and there's a ton of research that you need to cite, you need an appendix, right? But if you're writing like, a book on like happiness, and it's just about your breathing method or something, and then you don't need an appendix with a bunch of stuff, right? You don't have to prove people need to breathe to live. We do. There are people who get very, not the majority, but there's definitely a certain type of person who get very anxious about proving everything. And like, oh, I got to have all this data. And it's like, what's your book about? Yoga. It's like, no, you don't. You don't have to have that. Now look, if it's a book saying, here's the proof that yoga helps reduce blood serum cholesterol, okay, then you need data. If it's here's how to be good at yoga, you don't need data. All right, I told you conclusions would be quick. We might not have questions about that. Anything, Hal? Emily?
There's one in the chat that I think is helpful. In resources, like at the end of the book, is there any reason you can't list books that helped you, podcasts you listened to, etc., other media that helped you come to your conclusions?
If you do that, you'll die. No, I'm kidding. Again, totally fine, of course. Yeah, like if you want to have like a bibliography or further reading, or yeah, of course. Like I said, I'm gonna say this again and again and again. You have permission to do anything you want with your book. We're just telling you what guidelines are that make sense and that are practiced and proven. Right? Let me give you all, this is important, a really good example. We were joking about this with copy editors earlier. So all 4 of my books, which have sold, the ones about frat tire books, they've sold millions of copies. If you read those and you really understand grammar and verb tense, verb noun agreement tense, the books will drive you crazy. They absolutely will. Because the way I wrote them, I wanted the reader to feel like they were sitting with me at a bar, drinking beer and hearing stories, right? And so in order to do that, I had to break a lot of conventional grammar rules. And it worked. It worked really well. Grammar people, the rule people, hated it. Yeah, they can go suck on it. I don't care. But the point is, I understood the rules and I broke them on purpose with a specific reason in mind, and it worked well. Okay? So if you want to break, quote, rules or conventions, totally cool, go for it. Just make sure you're doing it on purpose for a reason and for something that either you know is going to work or you think is going to work or you want to try. Okay? But the bibliography and further reading is not even breaking a rule. That's just, yeah, cool. Put it in. Anything else?
Got a couple for you here. This is, again, I might detonate the Tucker bomb, but this is about, I think, really going back to making decisions. The question is, can one of the parking lot ideas become like a bonus chapter outside of the regular structure?
No, that's not detonating a bomb. That's just a dumb idea is what it is. No, I'm kidding. It's not dumb. Let me tell you, no, this is really important. Dumb's the wrong word. Aside from being mean, it's the wrong description. Because some people ask questions and like, no, that's really dumb. This wasn't dumb. What this is is someone who is, and I say this broadly, I don't know, whoever asked the question, I'm not speaking about you. I may not be speaking about you specifically, although maybe I am. Whenever you as a writer feel an urge, when you're really proud of something, an idea, a joke, a paragraph, and it doesn't fit in the book, it clearly doesn't fit, but you have an overwhelming urge to figure out a way to put it in, that's your narcissism and your ego. Fight that. Do not do that. Your book is not for you. It is for your reader. You get the benefit, but you are not writing this book to help you. The information in the book is not to help you. You already know it. You're the expert. That's why you're writing it, right? So if you're putting something in that isn't about, it's not helping the reader at all, then that's your ego, and it's you wanting you to look clever, and you want to look clever, you want to feel clever. Cut that shit all out, right? Now, if the bonus chapter is relevant to the book, my question is, why the hell would it be a bonus chapter? Put it in the book, right? Which I see this is the curse of knowledge. I can think of one example where this would actually make sense. If you're writing a book about a subject and there's you have 8 chapters and it's clear these all go in, but there's a weird sort of, there's a weird subset of issues that only happen for 20% of your readers and are not relevant to 80%, then I could see you can call it a bonus chapter where it's okay, let's stay with the yoga. I'm teaching someone how to be a yoga teacher. And so it's all the normal stuff. And then it's just go with his example. It's not that great, but let's say there's a chapter that's teaching yoga to people with disabilities. I would think that would be in the main book, but let's just pretend you're selling this to people who live in a world where there are no disabilities. But I'm supposed to be a writer. I come with these terrible examples. But a chapter on teaching yoga to someone with disabilities could be a bonus if it's not aligned with the full book, but it makes sense and is only applicable to a small amount. You could end the book and then label it as a bonus chapter, I guess. That works. That's the only way I could see this working. Otherwise, 95% of the time, when someone wants to do something like this, they just want to put something clever in their book. And guys, I can't tell you how many times I've fallen victim to this. I used to have my editor, Jeremy Ruby Strauss, and then my other editor, Niels. I had 2 main people who helped me with my books, in a professional sense, not just kind of people who gave me feedback. I would have a joke or something in there that I just thought was the greatest thing ever. And if one of them said no, I maybe not. But if both of them were no, then I would really evaluate. But I can think of 3 or 4 times where I just went to the mattresses over it. And it turns out I was wrong. No, this is dumb. No one cares. This is about you. This is you trying to look clever. And it's normal. If you have it, fight it. Because the more of that stuff you put in, the less good your book is.
So true. I'm literally editing a book right now by a Fortune 500 CEO, big narcissistic personality, who has
not a Fortune 500 CEO.
I know.
That's not possible.
He's got this email that he wrote that he really wants to include, and it's just about showing how he writes good emails, and it's
and how brilliant he is. Yeah,
how brilliant.
Look at how brilliant.
Look.
Hal,
I'm going to show him this clip.
No. Here's what you do. Here's what you do: is you tell him, "Well, we can totally put this in, but only if we call the chapter examples of how brilliant I am." Oh, I'm such a jerk.
I got one more for you here. I don't know if you want to go down this rabbit hole or not, but we see these questions a lot in various forums, and basically what to do about footnoting.
Don't put them in. Period. Again, unless you are writing an academic text that expects footnotes. And I doubt, we might have a few academics on it. We did last time. With the last 2 times, we've had a couple. Again, footnotes are the perfect example of what I was just talking about. If you need to footnote what you're saying, either put the info in the text or admit that you're just trying to look clever. I mean, go find a great book on here. I have 3,000 books in this room. Go find a great one that has footnotes. You might be able to find one or two. I can't think of one.
And just because we get a lot of confusion around this, when we say footnotes, we mean commentary at the bottom of the text.
That is a
not
footnote.
Citations for your sources.
Citations are not the same
included if you
thing.
need them.
And if you don't know the difference,
A
you
lot
need
of
to
people
learn.
don't, Tucker.
Okay, no, footnotes and endnotes. I can understand confusion with footnotes and endnotes. A footnote is at the bottom of the page. An endnote is commentary at the end. Endnotes are borderline narcissistic. If you really feel like, and if you're writing, it doesn't even have to be an academic text. If it's just a serious business text, I can see the case for endnotes, and that's cool. I get it. No problem. Fine. Makes sense. Footnotes, no way.
All right, Emily, seeing anything else here?
Well, we have one last question I want to call out because it's a good example of when an appendix could be used, which is, so this is from Jeanette saying, if I'm going to list places to go to save money in several different chapters of my book, would it make sense to have an appendix where that's all together? Yes, absolutely. That's the perfect thing to do.
That's an amazing resource. Absolutely. Right. Yep. Great idea.